I want to tell you today about the worst moment of my musical career. Before living here, I lived in South Dakota. And when I was there, I played in a country band. And if you aren't familiar with South Dakota, they love country music. It's more than just a genre, it's a requirement to like it. When I showed up there, I did not like it at all, but I grew to love it, played in this band. South Dakota is a land of cowboys and ranchers, and people love their country music. So I hopped in this band. The band was doing well. We were getting a little more popular, getting a little better. We began to grow, and things were just clicking for us. We were a cover band, and over time, we began to add some more songs to our repertoire. We decided to add the song Life is a Highway, the Rascal Flatts version, originally by Tom Cochrane. It's a great song. It's a lot of fun. That guitar that comes in, bam, 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 bam. And that song comes on, you feel the energy. We are pumped to add this to our set list. Shortly after this time, we get booked for this amazing gig. It was the biggest gig, the one we'd hoped for a long time. This gig was a big outdoor show in our hometown. They bring in bands from out of state, usually across the state. They shut down Main Street. There's thousands of people there. There's a little picture of me in my country band days there at downtown Rapid City. So we got booked for this gig, and we were stoked about it. It was going to be like the highlight of our career as a band. And the night's going great. We're having a lot of fun. We're feeling the energy. The crowd's feeling the energy. People are dancing, having a good time. We're rocking on stage. And our guitarist, in a moment of adrenaline-filled decision-making, he turns back to me and to our drummer, my friend Seth, and he yells across the stage. He goes, "Life is a highway." I look at Seth, and he looks at me, and we both know at the same time, this song starts with guitar. And if he starts this song, there is no going back. We are forced into this song. And start it, he did. He just does the ba 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 ba. I'm like, what do I do? I have no choice. Bum, 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 bum. We're just faking it. And we get through the first verse, and it's going okay. If you know the song, there's a ton of words in those verses. You get to the chorus, it's a little easier. Life is a highway. No big deal. That's easy to sing along. The second verse. Who knows the second verse? Our lead singer didn't. We get into this verse, and we just began to fall apart. I mean, it was a train wreck. It was beyond, the train disintegrated. There was no train left anymore. We just began to melt down on stage in front of our hometown crowd. A complete disaster for us as a band. In fact, after this band, it survived, but I played with Seth in other bands, our drummer, and we'd always talk about moments that maybe weren't our best musical moments on stage. Maybe we'd mess up a song, mess up a verse. Wasn't our best job. We just say, hey, at least it wasn't Life is a Highway. That became the bar for how bad a musical song could go with our bands. Those moments, when they happen, they are just so painful. But I think that a lot of us have had some kind of similar moment. Maybe not in front of 1,000 people in your hometown, but a moment where things are kind of falling apart. Supposed to be a highlight or a great part of your life begins to fall apart. This peak moment collapses and you feel totally exposed, like you're naked on stage in front of all these people. Your worst moment gets exposed. There's nothing you can do about it. I think for a lot of us, those moments happen in big ways, but also in small ways, in our families or at our jobs, among our friends. And we carry these things inside of us that we feel if they come to the surface, if they came out, we'd be totally ashamed. And we're just hoping that no one notices. As we begin our Lenten series, we're going to open in a story that takes place in John chapter 2, a similar moment of potential meltdown. It's often called the wedding at Cana. And if you read John's gospel, you might notice that his gospel is different than the other three gospels, the other Matthew, Mark, and Luke. See, John, his gospel is arranged in a very specific order. In fact, scholars would say that John is more focused on storytelling or meaning making than chronology. John has this thing he wants to tell us. It's more than just a biography. He has something he wants to teach us about Jesus as he tells his story in the way that he tells it. So let's go to John chapter 2 today. Jesus and his disciples, they've gone to this wedding in a small town in Cana up in Galilee. Now, I know a thing or two about weddings. In those country band days, we played a lot of weddings. Not because they're the most fun, but they pay the best. So we played a lot of weddings. And I've been to good weddings and bad weddings and fun weddings and boring weddings. But let me tell you, cowboys know how to party. I learned that in my country band days. But even the wildest wedding today, the most fun wedding today, wouldn't compare to the wedding at Cana. See, it wasn't like this 2:00 ceremony, 5:00 reception, 7:00 dinner and dancing, you're home by 10 p.m. Weddings in Jesus' day, they were a week-long event. They happened for multiple days in a row, and the whole community, the whole town would come out and celebrate with the bride and with the groom. It was an amazing celebration. And then somewhere, a couple of days into the celebration, the unthinkable happens. This unspeakable moment. They run out of wine. That may not seem like a big moment to us today. We're like, yeah, we'll go to the store. We'll buy a couple more bottles. What's the big deal? Well, for these people, in this context, it was more than a minor inconvenience. See, the groom's family, they're responsible for hospitality at the wedding. And running out of wine at your own wedding, it's a social disaster. It would have been this humiliating experience from which there could be no recovery. If you've ever lived in a small town or grew up in a small town, there's lots of small towns in Michigan. You know what it's like around here. You know how small towns can work, how fast word can get around. When someone's mistake, someone's mess up, someone's slip up becomes the conversation the next day, the diner, the gas station, the office, and this thing sticks to them. I lived in a small town for a while after college. Town of like 5,000 people. It was a beautiful place, great place to live and grow. I loved living there. I worked at an auto parts store. I drove the delivery car that brought the auto parts around to mechanics in town. And I remember being in the store behind the desk in the mornings. And from 8 a.m. when they opened till 5 p.m. when they closed, just person after person that came in, all that happened was the person at the desk just gossiped all day long, same story after story after story about who did what and who was where and who was with who and who said that the whole day. I could not handle it. That's what towns are like sometimes. That's what big towns can be like sometimes. You get these reputations, these word gets around, begins to stick with you, and all of a sudden, it's 5 years later, you're at the grocery store and someone's like, oh, that family, they're the ones who ran out of wine at their kid's wedding. And this reputation sticks with you. It's more than just an awkward moment. It's a shameful moment for this family. The kind of thing that would have defined them for years to come. So Mary comes to Jesus' mom, and says to him, as Jesus, they've run out of wine. Jesus is like, okay. But then he looks around and he sees these stone jars sitting there. And these are big stone jars, 120 to 180 gallons. They aren't just random jars. Actually, the fact that they're made from stone, John tells us, is very important. Because everyday jars are made from pottery or clay, but stone jars were set apart. They're special. They're used for ceremonial washing. They're used for religious practice, for keeping yourself clean, for religious performance. Jars you would never defile by using for some other purpose. Maybe if you grew up in church, you remember these areas that were so sacred in the church. Areas you didn't run or didn't play with, or if you got caught over there, you knew you were in big trouble. Any church kids out there remember those moments, those places, the things you didn't touch? I had those growing up. These were the jars of religion. And he says to the servants nearby, he says, take these jars and fill them to the brim. And they fill them up. And he says, take some of the water and bring it to the master of the banquet. And the master of the banquet, he tastes the water. But what he tastes is wine. Not just any wine. He actually calls the groom over and he says to him, he's like, everyone brings the choice wine first. Then, after the guests had too much to drink, great strategy, they bring out the cheaper wine. But you've saved the best wine until now. He's surprised, he's bewildered, he's blown away by what just happened. Think about what's happened here, this family. They're headed towards social meltdown. This inescapable, embarrassing moment, something that they carry with them forever, a moment of deep shame. It's not just internal shame, but communal, cultural shame. And Jesus doesn't just fix the problem. He comes up with this amazing, abundant solution, giving them more than enough wine. Estimated to be like 600 bottles of wine is what he made. It's not some kind of party or what, 600 bottles of wine. And he makes the very best wine worth writing home about. They're praising, the master of the banquet's praising the groom for this amazing wine. From the edge of disaster, from the precipice of disgrace, elevated to a place of honor. Remember I said John isn't just telling a biography here, but he's trying to make a point. And John's focus isn't primarily chronology, but it's about meaning, what he wants us to see in and about Jesus. See, John starts with this first miracle for a reason. The miracle of water into wine for a reason. And actually, he doesn't call what happened a miracle. He calls this act a sign. He says in verse 11 of chapter 2, he says, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. John organizes his gospel, his teaching about Jesus, around 7 signs. 7 signs that point to the beauty of Jesus. See, a miracle can show how powerful Jesus is. It shows the things he has authority over. It shows kind of what he can do. But these signs that John has, they point to who Jesus is. They point to what Jesus is like, to his character. They point us toward something. It's giving us a direction, pointing toward something coming. And in these 7 moments, he shows us Jesus healing a blind man, healing a dying boy, healing a paralyzed man, feeding thousands of people from almost nothing, raising a man named Lazarus from the dead. And finally, he shows us Jesus himself on the cross, the God of the universe. These 7 signs, 7 pictures, 7 windows into what Jesus is like, who he is, who God is. But the first sign that he gives us, the first thing he wants us to see and hear, the one that sets the stage, is this one. It's not a healing or a resurrection or feeding thousands of people. It's in a tiny little town in a place called Galilee, where this unsuspecting family on the verge of societal shame is saved and redeemed and brought to a place of honor. This Lenten season, we're going to walk through all kinds of different tables, talk about Jesus at different tables each week. But our first table, this wedding banquet table, the table where John starts, gives us a unique picture into what Jesus is like. What do we see? This picture of Jesus, this picture of God. We don't see a judge or a scorekeeper or someone standing back at a distance waiting for you to get everything right. We see John showing us this Jesus who shows up quietly, unassumingly, walking into a moment of potential deep shame and turning it into a moment of redemptive honor for this family. Sometimes we're looking for a miracle, and what God has for us is a sign. So if these signs reveal who Jesus is and what Jesus is like, I think we should ask now, thousands of years later, what's it mean for us here in 2026? So I think some of us, maybe a lot of us, we're carrying some kind of shame today. It may not feel like much. It may not feel catastrophic. Maybe you aren't running out of wine at a wedding or melting down with your country band on the stage. But you know what it's like to feel like you're on the edge of exposure, like you're on the edge of things falling apart. You're just hoping things that are unraveling your life won't come to light, that no one will notice. And maybe you have this picture of God in the process that you have to clean yourself up first before you can come to him with what's going on. Like the God's keeping score with you, or you have to do enough good to outweigh the bad in your life before you can bring it to him. That God's disappointed in you. You can't quite take the next step. I have to get a little more ready first before that. I know people today here are carrying things. You've got a weight in you, in your head, in your heart. Not because I can read your mind or because you're unique, but because people are people, and we all carry some of these things. Maybe it's marriage strain. You aren't the spouse you thought you'd be. Parenting stress. Maybe you yell at your kids more than you'd like. I've got 2 sick kids this week, and I have not been perfect. It has been a tough week for me. Sleepless nights and snotty noses. And sometimes I'm like, I could be a better dad than I am right now. We all carry these things. Financial stress. Maybe you're barely holding it together, hoping that no one notices. Maybe you're coming to the end of your high school, your college career, and you're like, I don't know what's next. My grades aren't where they should be. I don't have a school locked in or a job locked in. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know where I'm going. I feel completely lost. What if people knew? Maybe you feel this spiritual dryness that you just feel like you're all alone. And if people knew how far you felt from God, you'd just be ostracized. Maybe there are things that are so deep down inside you that even naming them or thinking about them just brings shame washing over you. But if you look at this story, at this first sign, if you see what Jesus is like, he's the kind of person who steps into shameful moments and doesn't just cover them over, but turns them into moments of honor. Maybe we can trust him with our messiest things too, with our shame too. Not wait till we have it all together, but let him work in and through and among it with us even the messiest parts, because that's who Jesus is. He's inviting you. He's inviting me to bring all of ourselves on this journey and let him work in and through and among us to bring our shame to honor and our failures to redemption. And then some of us, we approach God differently. We've kind of got things figured out. We've got a good handle on things. We're confident with how God works. We're more sure. We show up, get the right answers, do the right things. We have this picture of God, and it's a God who always agrees with us. Maybe it's a God who's always on our side. You picture a God who wouldn't ask you to do anything you don't already agree with or challenge what you already believe. And if we're honest, maybe some of the allegiances in your life to your own opinions or positions or to your comfort, maybe they're ahead of your allegiance to God. And maybe if God were to ask you to do this thing that completely disrupted your life, that maybe would turn someone else's story from shame to honor, you couldn't quite admit that God would ask you to do that, or to give that thing up, or to see that person that way, or see God like this. But look what Jesus does in this story. These ceremonial jars, these jars used for religious purity, for keeping people clean, for ritual performance, for perfect people, jars you would never use for wine. He takes them. He defiles them and he fills them instead with celebration. For Jesus, he cares more about hospitality, more about honor, more about redemption than he does religious correctness. If you think that following Jesus is about following every rule perfectly, if that's more important than being with people, watch how he prioritizes honor. He doesn't let traditions or the letter of the law get in the way of the spirit of love, in the way of loving people. So don't hold so tightly to the things we hold sacred, the religious boxes we're so sure of. Because what if God wants to challenge those and disrupt that thinking in your mind, in your categories you have in this season? Are you willing to admit that we don't always have it all figured out, that how we expect God to move might not be how he wants to do things, what he wants to do in your life? Are you willing to let God surprise you in this season? Take your convictions and see them with curiosity. Let your certainty be turned into surrender. John's story is for all of us today. What John does here, what John is pointing toward isn't just happening in this one story. In fact, it happens over and over again through the scriptures and through the stories of Jesus. Jesus brings honor where there's shame. He brings disruption where there's such certainty. He disrupts the rules with compassion. In Luke 18, he tells this story. There's two men who go up to the temple to pray. It's one of our Ash Wednesday stories if you're here for Ash Wednesday services. And one stands up front, a Pharisee, a religious leader. And he prays, he says, God, I thank you. I'm not like everybody else. Crooks, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of everything I received. The other man, a tax collector, someone everyone despised, he stands at a distance. He won't even look up to God. Instead, he beats his chest. He said, God, show mercy to me, a sinner. And Jesus says, I tell you, this person, the tax collector, went home justified rather than the Pharisee. All who lift themselves up will be brought low, and those who make themselves low will be lifted up. The one carrying shame went home with honor. The one carrying certainty went home empty. In Luke 14, there's a different story. There's a time where Jesus and his disciples are walking through a field, and it's the Sabbath, it's Sunday, the holy day, and the disciples are hungry. They begin to pull these husks of grain off the wheat as they're walking. And the Pharisees see them doing this. They come to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, do you see what they're doing here? They're defiling the holy day, your Sabbath day. They want him to reprimand them, to correct them. But he looks at them instead and he says, the Sabbath was created for humans. Humans weren't created for the Sabbath. He's disrupting their certainty, challenging their religious boxes, saying, you've got this backwards. The rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. This is who Jesus is time and time again. Here's what I want you to see. If you feel trapped by some kind of shame today, if you're carrying a weight, if there's things you're afraid to admit to yourself or to others, or if you're trapped by certainty, unable to admit that God can move in a way that you wouldn't expect, invite you into an idea that is new to you, outside what you would imagine God to be like. Both these things, they're forms of self-protection. They're ways we keep God at a distance, keep ourselves safe, avoid any risk. And both keep us from letting God surprise us with what he might want to do in us or through us or around us. To surprise us with redemption, surprise us with how we could see people, with how he sees people, what he might be inviting us into in this season. And this first sign says you can let go. You can allow yourself to be surprised. As you look at this story, I think it's important to look at what he does for this family, this journey from shame to honor, what he does with the jars, how he disrupts the practices of the day. But I think it's also important to notice the specific sign that he uses, this idea of turning water into wine. I think John knew something very important, long before we'd ever name it thousands of years later, and that is that the medium is the message. The actual act he does is incredibly important. Using this water to wine story is very intentional. Throughout scriptures, wine is a symbol of life. It's a symbol of abundance. It's a symbol of overflow. It's hope for redemption. And throughout the scriptures, God's people and God's prophets use it over and over again. One example in the book of Joel, the prophet Joel says this when looking at the hope for God's people being restored. He says, see, I'm sending you the corn, new wine, and fresh oil. You'll be satisfied by it fully. The threshing floors will be full of grain. The vats will overflow with new wine and fresh oil. Overflow, abundance, more than enough. Wine is about life. Wine is about abundance. In the Jewish mindset, they saw wine as the blood of the grape. When Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding, he's tapping into this whole thread that's throughout the scriptures, throughout tradition. Where there is emptiness, he's bringing fullness. Where there is death, he's bringing life. Where there is shame, he's bringing honor. It's more than just some party trick. It's a sign pointing forward, pointing toward himself. This table at Cana, it points toward another table. It points toward another cup where Jesus will say, this is my blood. This is the new covenant. This first sign in John, it points toward the final sign. It whispers of a sign to come, a table to come. It points to that moment where he invites all of us, invites the whole world to be transformed from shame into honor. A moment where the most supreme being gives everything up, flips upside down our understanding of greatness, our understanding of power, our understanding of influence, our understanding of the way that God works in our world. The journey from Cana to Calvary and to the cross, from shame to honor and death to life, from failure to redemption, from water to wine, it's an invitation for all of us. Lent is an invitation to journey. You can treat Lent like a religious practice. Wine can be wine and bread can be bread, and the stuff is just the stuff that we do. But the whole point of the stuff, the point of the journey, is to know God better in the process. We aren't walking toward a God waiting for us to get it all together. We're walking with a God who meets us in our shame, who takes that shame and turns it into honor, with a God who disrupts our certainty and invites us into something new, a new way of seeing the world, of seeing him. So if you're carrying shame, you can bring it with you. Bring your marriage strain and your parenting failures and your financial stress, the things that you're unsure about, your spiritual dryness. Bring it with you. Walk with this God. And as you walk with him, allow him to surprise you along the way, what he wants to do in you and among you on the journey. If you're carrying certainty, bring that too. Bring your need to be right, your need for comfort, your need for sureness. Bring your rock solid opinions. Because if Jesus would disrupt the leaders of his own day, the practices of his own day, the rules of his own day, maybe he wants to do the exact same thing in your world and in your life today. Maybe this season, what you need is to be disrupted, to reimagine what God might be like or what he might be inviting you into. A new understanding of how he wants to work in you and in our world with new perspective or new eyes to see yourself or him or those around you. What if God's inviting you into this thing that could disrupt your entire life in the best of surprises? This week, as we enter into this Lenten season, I want to invite you to bring one thing. Think about that one area in your life. Maybe that one area that is such a weight on you or so heavy in your heart. Or the thing that you've been so sure of, maybe you're beginning to wonder, is that actually what you're like? Or I know I've been pushing back on it, and I wanted to not believe you're saying that, but I think maybe you are speaking that to me. Pick one thing and bring it with you on this journey. Name it and watch what he does. Maybe you're holding that rock today. You want to feel the weight of that rock in your hand. Let that represent that one thing that maybe God's putting in your mind or in your heart this morning. Just feel the weight of it. Maybe grip it a little bit tighter and ask God to show you what it was he might be inviting you to this season. Because I believe John's telling us that we can trust the character of Jesus. We let him surprise you today.